All right. Hi, my name is Christina Stathis, and I am here today with a very special guest, Nancy. And how do I pronounce your last name?
Michelle.
Michelle. Okay. Well, Nancy, thank you so much for joining me today.
It's my pleasure. I'm glad
Yeah.
to be here, Christina.
Well, thank you. And Nancy is a leadership communication coach, which is very interesting. And I wanted to have this interview with her because I think a lot of us need help with our communication skills. It definitely has a lot to do with confidence. And me being a health coach, this comes up so frequently. So the first thing I wanted to ask you, Nancy, is what made you decide to make this your career?
Oh gosh. So have you ever been in the workplace and you struggle to connect with somebody? Like there's somebody on your team, whether it be your boss, maybe it's an employee, maybe it's just even a coworker who you struggle to connect with. I personally experienced this years and years ago. I have a background in engineering, and my boss walked into my office one day, and you can feel, you know how you can feel that tension when somebody's coming up to you and you're like, oh, this is not going to be a good conversation.
Yeah.
And she walked in and she said, Nancy, we need to have a chat. And I knew that this was not going to go in a good place, in a good way. And I was like, what have I done? Anyways, in this chat, she told me how I was a horrible person, how people didn't like me, how people weren't connecting with me. And I had just been working 100-hour weeks. So imagine that, right? On top of having your boss, my stress level was through the roof. I started to break down in tears. I was like, what is this? Because I care very, very deeply for my staff. And so we all have those situations, right? Where somebody gives us feedback that we're like, where is this coming from? Anyways, I finished the conversation with her. She's like, do you want me to stay the afternoon and finish your shift and you can go home? And I was like, nope, suck back the tears, right? I'm like, okay, I'm going to put all this energy in and went back to the office. My staff happened to see me come back and they're like, are you okay? Because this person had gone out intentionally to find out whether people liked me or disliked me working on this role. And then the next day happened to be a Sunday, so everybody was off. And then the following day was a big leadership meeting, and I was giving a presentation to the leadership team. My boss happened to be sitting there. And afterwards, with two of my staff who happened to be in this meeting as well, most people left, turns to me and says, wow, I can't believe how you have transformed all of your relationships and how much people really appreciate you today. And I'm like, what? Like, what just happened, right? Less than 48 hours, I am being told that I am like the worst person. And so this then led me on a path where I actually became very self conscious of what I said, how I communicated at work. I became very restrictive in connecting with people and became very, very closed and tight about it. And it led me to um, having even worse conversations with people at work. I like really, my stress level was high. I moved into more of a micromanaging style of communication. And so I hired a coach at that time and who helped me with discovering emotional intelligence and what was wrong. And he's like, you know what, there's nothing wrong with your communication style. You received really bad feedback and you took it personally. And so let's unwind that process. And so that led me on a path over my engineering career to realize that communication in the corporate world, especially, is what can motivate or demotivate your staff, your team. And learning how to adapt is one of the keys to success.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. That's such a great story. And
Oh,
yeah,
thank
I
you.
think a lot of people can relate to what you're saying.
Mhm.
Definitely people, especially with your boss, that's somebody that, you look up to, and receiving that kind of, that feedback. Wow. That's,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a lot to take in. And
Mhm.
definitely I can see, when you're not confident in your communication, yeah, you just go into your shell, and you feel so nervous and so awkward that when you do try to
Mhm.
communicate, I mean, you're just stumbling your way through, and you really don't want to be there in the first place, which just makes everything, so much worse, right?
Right. Right. And communication is the key to every relationship, right? It is the key to success. Right here, we're having communication, right, as a way to provide insights to your client and your team of people. But every relationship, whether it be between couples, whether it be parent child, whether it be between friends, whether it be teacher child, right, workplace, it's all due to communication. And so becoming exceptional at communication is key to success in anybody's life and anybody's relationship.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I mean, we are always looking to connect as human beings, and the
Mhm.
first way to connect is to communicate, right? So yeah, I agree
Yeah.
with that. Definitely.
Yeah. Hmm.
Well, thank you. And the next thing I wanted to ask you is if you can share with me a little bit about what exactly is it that you do in your career?
Yeah. So I am a leadership communication coach. And my intention is to help build talented leaders who know how to communicate with their staff so that we can create happier cultures in workplaces and we create more productivity. Because when teams of people can work together and have things like healthy conflict, bring up ideas with confidence and motivate each other and share those ideas with the broader world, then we are able to create places where people enjoy going to work.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah, no, definitely. And I think a lot of times there are people that are in a leadership role, but
Mhm.
they're a little bit stunted because, yeah, their communication skills are lacking. So they're not really able to live up to their potential because
Right.
of that.
Hmm. Exactly. Right. And their team can't live up to their potential when the leader is struggling to communicate really well.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah. And I mean, there you can have all the knowledge in the world and all the experience, but yeah, if you're not able to, show up in that way, because really a lot
Hmm.
of communication has to do with our confidence, right?
It does. It does. Our
Um,
confidence is our confidence and communication go well hand in hand.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and so talking about that, do you have any stories, any scenarios that you can share where, something that kind of sticks out in your mind, something that was significant?
Oh, any story? Gosh, there's so many stories. I'm gonna do one that's actually a personal relationship with me and my husband. So my husband and I speak through different personality types. My husband is one of these people who's fun and very silly and has like a lot of laughter. And in the method I teach, we call that the rebel base personality in communication. So it's fun and spontaneity is how he communicates. And I, on the other hand, communicate through very logic, structure, and order, which is why I was an engineer for 25 years. But what is interesting is I will ask him, and see if anybody's ever experienced this. I'll ask him, like, hey, what do you want to do for dinner? And he'll be like, oh, I don't know, whatever you want. And I'm like, I just like make a decision. Tell me what you want, right? And it just drives me absolutely nuts because it's like, you are capable of making a decision, do it, right? But this is one of these miscommunication patterns that starts to happen. And when we get into it, it then causes us to do what we call putting on a mask. And that mask is like our little protection to say that, okay, either I'm not okay in this situation and you are okay because you're being silly or being fun and I'm getting frustrated with it, or I am okay because I am right and knowledgeable and you're being dumb and silly in this situation, right? So we put on these masks, and when we do, that triggers us not to be able to have a good conversation. So I have learned with my husband that this is like a pattern that he has of his miscommunication. And so it's just easier for me to say, hey, I was thinking of this for dinner tonight. What do you think? And get him and get agreement, as opposed to like asking, because it will just go around in circles like children.
Wow. Yeah, I think a lot of people can relate to that for sure. And I think a lot of relationships get, suffer because yeah, people
Right.
have different communication styles and not understanding that.
Right. And where that's coming from and what is behind that communication style.
Yeah.
The way we communicate was developed actually early on as a child. And so it's a pattern of language that we repeat over and over and over again. And even these little miscommunications are patterns that we've developed over a long period of time.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And I mean, I think, a lot of times, like I work a lot with introverts.
Yeah.
And I used to be an introvert, which is why, like I said, I connect with them,
Hmm.
quite well. And I had to teach myself how to become an extrovert. And, and through that process, obviously, I'm very comfortable, speaking in front of people, speaking in front of, I've been in movies and commercials and,
Right.
it's fine. But obviously an introvert would never want to, be in that position. So yeah, when you're asking him these open-ended questions,
Hmm.
know, you get this response, like you're saying with your husband. And
You do.
yeah, when you have somebody that, is very comfortable communicating, that's more the extrovert, it can be very frustrating and looking at them like this person doesn't want to communicate with me or they're not really listening. And we really just put the blame on that person.
Hmm. Exactly. Exactly. That's a great way of describing it, right? Is we see the other person's communication style as something that they're doing to us, as opposed to that is their natural style. And so when I work with clients, I teach you how to be able to adapt to all of the other styles. And we can do it naturally, without. So you were talking about, you were introverted and you taught yourself to be extroverted. Well, one of the things that I teach in this model that is a slight difference is that we either want to withdraw from people or we want to engage with people. But we all have a certain percentage of the day of the energy that we can spend in any of those abilities between withdrawing and engaging. What really happens is that we need to realize that we have psychological needs that relate to our stress. So somebody who's truly introverted needs to make sure that in their day they balance quiet time, they balance alone time to process all of the things that are going on in their mind. And so often when communicating to somebody who's introverted, it's asking a question in a way that directs the thinking part of their mind and gives them capacity to have time to process without responding immediately.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, because there's a lot of pressure, right? Somebody comes
Mm-hmm.
forth and they're very confident what they're saying. A lot of times they're very high energy and they're throwing the energy at somebody and their
Exactly.
energy doesn't match. And so first of all, they're just hit with that energy and they
Mm-hmm.
have to cope with that first. And then you're waiting for a response. And then they
Right.
feel all this pressure and they feel overwhelmed and their mind starts taking over and they start hearing all
Exactly.
these things and then they start retreating, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Right. So, one of the things that I teach people is to be able to read each other's communication style through their body language, their gesture, their posture, their facial expression, and then their words. So we want to pay attention to the body language more than the words that they're saying. And through that, you can start to understand what communication style that person prefers, and then how you can adapt authentically to that person's style so that you can engage the conversation. Because if we can keep the other person out of stress in the conversation, then they will be able to adapt to the other styles that are presented as well.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think that's a lot of me personally, been my success as far as, being able to connect with people, is that somehow I've always had kind of that natural skill to, see how people are and just wait until they're comfortable before, really, engaging. Which leads up to my next question that I wanted to ask you. Yeah.
Okay.
I know you have your niche and you're working with, people that are in leadership roles, but you have so much to offer. And so I really want to ask, if you can share with us some basic tips just for the regular type of person that's going to help us improve our communication skills in day-to-day life.
Got you. So the first one that I want to offer is a myth that I would like to bust.
Okay.
And that myth is treat others the way you want to be treated. Not everybody speaks the same way and communicates and perceives the world the same way you do. What you want to do is treat others the way they want to be treated. So take some time, pay attention, observe what they are, how they are communicating, and then try and model that back to them to the best of your ability.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, we forget so often to observe. We're so caught up with, sharing our message and, and trying to get it across and just trying to, just go in there and connect right away. We forget to observe and then and then it doesn't go the way that we had wanted it to.
Exactly. So that's like the first one that I think is really important. The second is how we communicate is more important than what we say. And so what I mean by that is really we continue down this road of observation, right? How do you communicate? Do you show up with massive amount of energy to somebody who's introverted and quiet, right? So paying attention to all of your body language, to the volume of your tone, to your facial expressions, and being aware and observant of how you show up is more important, because people can walk into a room or they will make a judgment of you before you even say a word. So being aware of how you show up is really important in communication.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I mean, like going into this thing about talking about, people who naturally look to communicate and people who kind of shy away from it, my experience has been, even though, talking to these people that, oh yeah, I'm fine just being by myself, I'm fine being a loner and just staying in my house, when it comes down to it, that's not truly what they want. That's just their comfort zone. That's their safe zone. But once they start feeling safe to engage, once they start feeling like somebody truly wants to know them and not judge them, then they really are looking to connect.
Yeah. So and then the third one that I would recommend is around converse, not speak. So everything is really a conversation. Even the person who's standing on a stage giving a presentation, the intention is a conversation. What is it you're inviting the other person? And how, at the end of that conversation, do you want them to think, feel, or act? And so when you think about those types of things, you can start to engage how is the other person receiving this information, so that I can potentially inspire them to think, feel, or act in a different way because of the words that I've said and how they've landed.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's very interesting. Now, are you able to provide us with some kind of example of that so we can kind of grasp what you mean?
Yeah. Exactly. So in this conversation that we're having, right, I would love people to recognize that communication is more about how you connect than what you say, right? So it's more about, okay, am I leaving you during this conversation with the impression to pay attention to people's body language, their facial expression, their smile that you just have? And so when you engage in a conversation, it's not to speak, but it's to create a conversation with some sort of response back. And so you can do that. And the response can be as simple as what you just did. You smiled in that portion of it. And it's like, okay, I feel that she's connecting from that perspective.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I spent most of my life as a yoga teacher, and
Mm,
I teach what used to be called Bikram yoga. A lot of people call it hot yoga now.
yes.
Um, it's not what a lot of people think of when you teach. It's not that, I'm sitting there practicing and telling you what to do at the same time. I'm just up on a podium, a lot of times the microphone, and there can be even, like, I've taught over 400 people in the room,
Mhm.
and I'm watching them and I'm explaining what to do, how to do it, and the effects of doing it. And I'm talking nonstop. And I mean, I've been trained. We have a very specific kind of script that we use and obviously adapt
Right.
to personality. But that script is called a dialogue. And a lot of
Exactly.
times, a lot of times the teacher will say, like, follow my dialogue, follow my dialogue. And then we have to explain because they're like, well, we're not allowed to talk. And we're like, no, no,
Right.
no. We are speaking with our voice and you are
Mhm.
responding with your body.
Exactly.
So
Right.
it goes along with what you're saying. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. And so we want to speak to inspire and connect from a positive perspective as opposed to speak or communicate that causes people to withdraw. So when you think about what is it that I want somebody to think, feel, or do from having this intentional conversation, right? It's not always that you need to hear the words back, but you can tell based on their body language whether it's resonating or it's a negative impact. And so being aware of that beforehand is really helpful in communication.
Yeah. Well, Nancy, I think those are some really good tips that I hope everybody can appreciate and put into place and start connecting, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It was such a pleasure to have this conversation with you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. And just tell me quickly, if people do want to connect with you, what's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, so I'm biggest on LinkedIn, but you can find me also on Instagram, and my handle is Nancy Michelle Coaching. You'll find me everywhere under that sign.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much, Nancy.
Thank you, Christina. Have a lovely day.
You too.